Hello and welcome back inside the Park from A for podcast number 824. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, for your kind consideration, we are going to offer you the great big bouncy F1 preview of 2023. But in order to do that, of course, I have to introduce my co-host. You know him, you love him. He is a wicked genius, just a rapier wit. He's got that funny British accent. Oh my gosh, the professional driver that is the sporting manager of Heart of Racing, Aston Martin Racing for the IMSA team, number 27 and 23, and the 24 Hours of Daytona Class champion, I might also mention. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. Genius? No.
Oh,
but you know,
you're a musical genius, Paul.
I'm not that either, so I wouldn't have quit that either. I don't know.
Yeah,
Jack of all trades, master of none. But the trades I've learned have put me in the spot I'm in, so I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's exciting. I guess I got to ask right up front, Paul. Did you binge watch Drive to Survive season 5?
Negative, sir. I saw episode 1 so far.
Ah, okay.
Which was pedestrian, I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I kind of know how the story goes, kind of, but,
well, that's a funny thing. You may not.
Oh, okay. Did you binge watch the whole thing already?
I did.
Did you really? Was it better than the previous ones?
No.
No. Okay.
I with all deference, you have to write a script and they want to make it entertaining, and I of course understand that. But this whole season, I watched it. It just felt really compressed. I think I understand they were trying to do a team per episode.
Right.
Pretty much missed Williams on that deal. It felt a little cobbled together, but overall, it felt really compressed. That, like they were trying to get a lot of storylines in. They had a whole episode on Japan and Yuki and the Japanese Grand Prix, and they didn't even talk about the tractor that was on track and Pierre Gasly, and avoided the FIA like the plague. They didn't mention any of Eddie Everywhere's antics, the clampdown on jewelry. They didn't mention any of that. They it was really, I would say, in some sense, sanitized a little. It seemed like maybe the F1, and I know a lot of people were screaming about it being, creative liberties and creating narratives that weren't there and all that, and I think they took that to heart. Maybe a little too far the other way, but they missed some really big stories last year. Complete wholesale missed it. Didn't even talk about it, which the whole sort of friction between Sergio and Max, right?
That didn't even come up?
Mm-mm.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because you thought that would be real juicy for him,
Yeah. I mean, the one juicy thing was Total losing his ass, in the team boss meeting. Change your effing car. So what Christian said, which I think most people were saying all season long. If you've got a problem with your car, just change the car, lift the rear end, right? But anyway, so I was it's unfortunate. This is my sad.
It's a difficult format, and they've got a lot to live up to. Basically Formula One and all these teams adding zeros to their value based on a TV show. You know what I'm saying? It's like now they've got a lot of what would you call it? I don't know. But there's a lot of pressure, I think, on the TV series to not upset the apple cart in some form or fashion. But in there, you're going to lose maybe what was ultimately good about it, right?
Yeah. And if there's so much about Formula One that is kind of tied to this property in Drive to Survive, if it goes really well, that's great. If it goes really bad, that may be not so great, right? And I think F1 certainly was trying to manage that narrative, and I think I found it interesting that they have completely avoided the FIA didn't even come up. And I think the FIA, with the new president, the power struggles, didn't mention Andretti, trying to get in, didn't mention the, any of that stuff. And I think, anyway, like I said, I've got a lot of deference for him. It's very difficult. I have certainly, I could sit here and spend an hour waxing poetic everything I thought was falling short of the mark, but it's just my opinion, and was it matter?
Yeah, it's interesting because in Senna, the movie, which was his first, go at it. There was a big portion was FIA and Balestra and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a lot going on.
There was a lot going on. Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. I wonder if that's going to affect the fan base at all. Is it going to grow tired, and then, or is Formula One? Is that show brought people in and now they're actually in, they're bought into the series rather than just bought into the show?
Is there some stickiness now?
Now
that they've got the fan base, do they really need DTS, right?
Right.
Or is, Formula One going to be...
Netflix are a real bunch, aren't they?
At this point, do they really need that vehicle to keep the stickiness in the fan base, or the fans stuck, and
and also the timeline is different, right? Because now everyone's looking at the series that happened last year.
Yeah, right.
Whereas before, they never even knew a series even happened, right? So it was as live to them as anything. But now those fans are in, they're watching the races, they're watching the storylines from race to race to race. So now it's F1's, prerogative, or that what they should be doing is using the access that show brought to them and kind of expose parts of things like that during the actual race weekends.
Yeah, right.
Which they can do. They can do that.
They could. I think, look, I'm not taking them out in the street and kicking the crap out of them here. They got a tough job, and I don't want to lose sight. The value of it still, regardless of entertainment value, regardless of pace, regardless of everything that the criticisms may be, I've got a line, it's misogynistic and racist. I can't. But the reality of it is that the really good thing about it is really team and driver access. And behind the scenes access that most fans will never have. And that's the value of it. And I think maybe they just need to take a step back with F1, kind of look at the format, see if they could evolve the format, much like an F1 car evolves year on year. Maybe the series needs to evolve a little bit, find a new angle to keep the stickiness. Now that you've got the fan base, now let's start to go back and maybe some history pieces. Where did the Red Bull team actually come from, right? And you could trace that back. I mean, take a guy like Alan Permain at Alpine. Alan Permain's been at just about damn near every iteration of that team since, the 80s, 90s? 90s.
Yeah, absolutely, the 90s. Yeah,
sure. So they could definitely follow some interesting stuff that creates even more stickiness for new fans about the history of the sport, which would be kind of cool too, I think. So, who is Gordon Murray?
He's the god of car design.
Who is Gordon Murray, and why is it important, right? So anyway, let's talk about testing. That's what we're here to do. This is the big season preview. But before you can preview the season, we had the single 3-day test for Formula One. There's only one test. This is a real departure from the past, Paul, because it used to be, let me preface this by saying that Jonathan Noble, bless his heart, over at Motorsport, was reading a lot of comments on social media about how boring testing was, and I guess he felt compelled enough to write an article, bless his heart, on how they may be able to spice up the show. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's testing.
It's not a show. It's testing.
It's not a show. It's testing. And so I think contextually, and Jonathan's a smart guy. He knows that. But like I said, fair point to him, and good on him for trying to maybe add
I think it's really difficult for the teams nowadays because of the exposure that spice up the show, spice up a televised version of the testing is bizarre to me. I mean, it's testing is usually the place where teams can go off in private and do their own thing, develop their cars, but nowadays that's all changed. First off, the testing is very limited time wise. I mean, 3 days is crazy
compared.
Well, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Compared, what they're doing in the off season, the very short off season now due to an extended calendar.
Yeah.
What they're doing is building a car from scratch. Think about car companies. They spend 4 years trying to build a road car.
Yeah.
From scratch. So they're building a race car from scratch, fastest car in the world. And all they get is 3 days of testing with all the other teams in front of everybody else, the exposure. They don't get just to focus on their car. They also have to think about the PR and this and the show and the interviews and distractions all over the place. I mean, we're an IMSA team. We got a GT3 Aston. We've been running it for 3 years now. And we get more test days than Formula One does, and we need them, right?
Yeah.
Everyone needs more testing, but I hats off to the teams and all the people that work for them to be able to put these cars out in the reliable factor that they do in the short time they are allowed to build them. And literally come out and testing day one is used to be, cars were stopping all over the place. Cars was, they'd found something totally wrong. They have to fly off to go get a part that can't run for the car for a couple of days. That just literally couldn't happen anymore because they would miss the boat on the testing completely. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's
and
an incredible feat by these guys.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you think about it, Paul, there's maybe if you're a newer fan, you're thinking, wow, I'm really gotten into Formula One and I watch the races. Those are exciting. Drive, Survive, those kind of things. I read a lot of the news reports and different websites, and there's a host of, you can't shake a stick without hitting a content creator and an F1 influencer these days. But nothing wrong with any of that. But then you've got the the other fans have been watching Formula One for a long time, and we're sitting, maybe testing is boring for a newer fan, but you've got a bunch of older fans that are thinking, no, dude, you don't understand how grateful, how lucky we are to even see testing, because we would never see testing before. It was all done in secret and it was long, and these teams are in there. And how, there were days during testing, if it was a Barcelona, that fans would be pressed up against the fences just to watch the cars go by and get some glimpse of testing and pace with stopwatches just to try to figure this out. And now we've got full access and all the video, and thank God they're covering the entirety of testing, and that's another thing. You compress it to 3 days, you can get that kind of coverage and access. So kudos to F1. I don't know where people's criticism were coming from. To be honest with you, and I tweeted this, I think Sky Sports did a great job with Crofty and Ant and Rachel and Ted. They had Mario from Pirelli long form interviews during testing. They had Niels Vidic, the FIA race director, long form interview. I think Crofty did a great job, and so did Ant, in interviewing them and finding out more about how the FIA runs, what the remote team is responsible for, what the stewards are, really unpacking the sport. And I think if you cared to listen, there was a lot to learn and a lot of interesting information that Sky brought to kind of make it even more valuable content. They did a great job.
No, they did.
Yeah.
Pietro
Fittipaldi
that's
was
the
on.
beauty. I love the interviews, and as you say, the long form where you're not just looking for a snap bite to get excited about what just happened. Literally getting a lot of depth in what's going on behind the scenes, which it's a beautiful thing. Intriguing. Somewhat.
I thought it was too.
And Anson and analyst is also top notch, as is Pietro's. He gets to drive some of those cars, so he's got extra feedback, and so you're really getting you're allowed to spend the time to talk about things you don't normally do on a hectic race weekend.
Right. When you're allowed that time, you can really uncompress the content and really dive in a lot deeper. So I thought they did a great job. But so as we head into 2023, there were a spate of regulation changes. I'm not going to read all of this that I've written down. I went to Formula One's website, got the regulation changes. Some of them have come to pass, and they are applicable for 2023. Some aren't. First of all, the ride heights were raised 15 millimeter. The diffuser throat height has been raised. This is all in order to stop the porpoising, and they put more sensors underneath so the FIA can gauge the level of bounce of these cars and try to mitigate a lot of that porpoising. And I would say, out of testing, it looks like they've achieved that. Stronger roll hoop. This comes on the back of Joe Guan Yu's really bad crash last year, where the roll hoop on that Alfa Romeo Sauber just sort of disintegrated, just gone, so it's got to be rounded now so it doesn't dig in and flip the car and those kind of things, and stronger. So they've mandated that. They did come out with a reduction in minimum weight. They were going to reduce it 2 kilograms, and I had that in there, and I had forgotten that the team said, whoa, we're not doing that. Paul, thanks for reminding me. So it's staying at 798 kilograms. I think part of that was the tires are heavier this year too, because as Mario said during practice when he was interviewed, the sidewalls are more durable, stronger, a little more load, a little more weight on those tires. And so that's a good thing. They've doubled
that's ultimately where failures begin, is the sidewall.
Yeah.
Especially, when you go out on low tire pressure, that's the first 2 laps on a tire is where it's stressed the most till the pressures come up, temperatures come up, that kind of thing. So stiffening the sidewall is definitely a positive addition to the team, even though it does add the weight.
And those low profile Michelins that you guys run, those pretty stiff sidewalls.
But even so, you go out on low pressure because ultimately the tire is going to grow to a certain point, so you've got to set them, and sometimes where you'd want to set them so low to get to the point you really want to be at is nearly impossible because you just do too much damage. So you can't hit curbs on the first couple laps when you're out there. So when you see cars come out of the pit lane, you'll see them. They'll be a little bit off the pace.
Those racing lines will be a little more sterile.
You just can't hit the curb those first 2 laps. And if you do, it don't necessarily compound itself instantly, but halfway through a stint, then you can have a failure. So you got to be careful with all that stuff. And I said earlier, just kind of getting around that by basically making the sidewall a bit more stout.
Yeah. They're going to make their mirrors larger. You can't see anything on an F1 mirror. They've doubled the number of sprint races. Sprint, yay. And there was much rejoicing. Yay. The double the sprint race, Baku, Austria, Belgium Grand Prix, Qatar, U.S. Grand Prix in Austin, Sao Paulo.
Baku's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. The sprint race accident damage allowance has been increased too. Now it's doubled, I think, to 300,000 to offset the cost of any damage incurred during one of the sprint.
Now that's a set fee they get, or they only get it if they hit something.
Yeah, I don't know if it's only if. Maybe it is, because I would think it would be. But you'd have to go and apply and say, Rock hit our front wing here. Need that 300 grand, right? Let's see. I did have it in here, Paul. It was right in. I just didn't highlight it. Reduction of working hours. They're cutting an hour off of Fridays from Friday onward during the weekend. They're cutting an hour out of that for the mechanics and team to be working on the cars, and then that Wednesday, Thursday sessions are reduced by half an hour. So limited hands-on time, or they're limiting hands-on time with those cars.
That's good.
Qualifying in DRS. I'm not sure how I feel about this, Paul, and I'll tell you why after I read this. So 2 events will try a revised qualifying format, or what the F1's calling the RQF. The tire compounds will be mandated for each stage of F1's usual 3-part qualifying session, meaning that the hard tires are only going to be used in Q1, medium tires will be used in Q2, and finally soft tires in Q3. Now, I think that's actually just going to calcify the grid a lot faster I mean, part of getting into Q2 is throwing super softs on a Williams and going for
trying to get there while the other teams are running mediums. Can we make it through on mediums?
Yeah. Which is part of the fun, right?
Right.
And if you've got one of those cusp teams that's always sort of on that cusp, maybe it's Alfa Romeo or Alpha Tauri or something, you gamble, you throw those softs on, you get up there, and then that kind of puts cars a little out of position. I don't know. It just seems fine the way it is. So I guess we'll have to see.
And then also some teams just dislike a certain compound on a weekend.
Yeah, right.
So if you're a team that can't survive on the hards, if you just slide around all over the place, even though your car may be Q3 worthy, you may miss the mark because it just doesn't work on that particular tire. So
right, maybe in that case there were a few times that the cars that didn't generate a lot of heat in their tires quite as quickly, whereas like last year Ferrari had a problem with generating a lot of heat and getting graining and that kind of thing. Maybe Mercedes a little less so. So they may not fare as well on those hard compounds. They may just choose to run mediums and softs during qualifying. To your
given
point.
the choice.
Yeah, given the choice, right? Let's see. Also, they're going to test DRS out as well. The thought here is that the DRS usage will be tested at each sprint race regarding the start of the race restart, safety car restart, basically in activating DRS earlier. I think, what is it now? 3 laps have to go.
It's 3 laps in.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be 2 laps in.
Yeah, 2
I think.
Yeah.
Oh, it said on the second lap. I don't know what that means. At the end of the second lap or the end of the first lap?
Or the beginning of the second lap. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
So they're doing that. I was hoping they'd just say we're going to do away with DRS. Not so lucky. Gearboxes, while changes to the team's homologated gearboxes were only permitted to, quote, resolve reliability problems, end quote, now, or for cost savings at the start of each season. Now they've modified that and they're permitting, quote, in the case of materials, processes, or proprietary parts becoming unavailable, end quote. Now, I think there's a legit reason for having that.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Yep. But it could be an area the FIA want to watch pretty closely.
Yeah, I mean, as Formula One teams tend to do, they'll use any angle they can to get an advantage, and that could be one. But yes, supply chain is an issue in a lot of things, and certainly in motorsport. It affects us, affects Formula One, it affects every line of motorsport, really.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy, how that whole thing can. One little thing that happens in a different country can affect you getting this gearbox link part. Yeah. Right. So
yeah, it's pretty interesting. In my day job, it's in the audiovisual industry.
Yeah, probably exactly the same thing. Yeah,
same thing. It puts our R&D, and they're brilliant people, but it puts our R&D kind of in a situation where they're going to re-engineer, redesign circuitry and componentry. To utilize other components that's more readily available. And then obviously the company I work for has multiple sources for redundancy and all that kind of thing through logistics. But that's, tough situation. Grid penalties. Remember Italy last year? That was a debacle. Well, that was confusing. So they're making changes. Now, quote, classified drivers who have accrued more than 15 cumulative grid position penalties or have been penalized to start at the back of the grid will now start behind any other classified driver.
Okay.
So
I'm not sure I understand that fully, but
well, let's say you were on pole, but you got a 10-place grid penalty. And you were moving back, or you were penalized, you had accrued, it's going to be more than 10. So let's say you had a 10-place grid penalty for change of engine and a 5 grid penalty. If you have more than 15 grid position penalty, then you start behind anyone else that's classified.
Okay, gotcha. So if you're on pole and you've got 16 penalties, you don't start 16th, you start last.
You start behind anybody that's classified.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Yes. Also, cool fuel. Fuel in the car must be colder than, must not be colder than the lowest of either 10 degrees centigrade below ambient temperature or 10 degrees centigrade, this being cut from 20 degrees at any time when the car is running. Basically, they're limiting the how cold the temperature can be, the fuel can be. If you're new to F1, colder fuel is a real advantage for the team, so they're limiting how much they can chill that fuel.
And they're doing that because of kind of like the tire blankets, where they think eventually it's gonna be a cost saving or a
I'm wondering if
environmental saving.
Yeah, I don't know all the justifications beyond the benefit that you get in performance in the engine from colder fuel, which also would be a tire blanket thing. The benefit you get from, getting your tires and wheels red hot.
But if all the teams have it, then it's all.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
But there's different fuel companies, different engines perform differently with the fuels that were created for them, and maybe there's a little disparity there. I don't know. But anyway, they felt compelled to do that.
That's obliged.
So that is the regulation change. Now let's get into the preview, shall we? That's what testing and the regulations, and that's kind of all that. But let's get into the preview. And we're going to start at the back of the grids with the teams that need the biggest help. And so we're going to start there. I'm going to talk about the team, who's driving for the team. Then we get into the challenges that Paul and I feel the team face in 2023. So let's start at the very back, Paul, with Williams. Yes. Now, if you're an American and you're not a Williams fan, maybe you should be, because Logan Sargent, the sole American Formula One driver, will be on the grid in 2023. It's his debut season. He's going to be driving for Williams alongside Alex Albon, who's got 2 podiums, 201 points, and 44 Grand Prix starts. So there's just a quick recap of the two. I think from a driver perspective, Paul, I think Alex has been doing a bang-up job. I think he did a great job last year. I think he put that car in places last year it had no business being in. I expect him to be a great team leader going forward again this year. If the car is slightly better as an evolved car from last year's, then I think he's going to be the one to deliver. From Logan's perspective, it's a debut season, right? He's got to get his feet wet. I think he's got a lot to learn, and I think my hunch is, I don't know Alex personally, but I think he seems like the kind of person that would help Logan kind of, get his sea legs there. How do you see the challenge for the driver perspective?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Logan's coming. He's on a wave, a bit like a couple of other drivers that are making their debuts. He was part of, a young driver program, and he's had a good momentum, and that momentum carried him all the way to Formula One. It was a nail-biting finish to get him into his seat, to get his points, his super license points. He had to finish 4th or something in the last race in F2 to get enough points, and he did that. I think he's a pretty handy driver from what I've seen. I think it's an upgrade from Latifi for sure.
For sure.
For him, one degree it's frustrating. You're in the slowest car probably on the grid, but with that comes no pressure, right? But also it makes difficult to make an impact at all. So it's it depends on how his whole career and contracts are set up, whether this is literally a year where he can literally just learn the ropes and there's no pressure to do that. Kind of like the Haas boys when they jumped on. But I think he's going to do pretty well. I think Albon will be very receptive. I mean, you're the lowliest team.
Yeah.
That brings everyone together, right? They're not going to be fighting each other out versus that. They've got a big struggle to try and get that car, even one car manufacturer, up further down the grid. So they'll be working. Anything Albon can do to help Logan be a more effective driver is going to be an advantage for Albon as well.
Yeah, for sure. And they'll have to maximize. I think you're right. Getting Logan up to speed as quickly as possible would be good for Alex and the team to try to maximize and take advantage of any attrition and nip off points. And I think that's kind of where they're going to be.
Yeah, and obviously, they've lost their manager or the team lead from last year, but they also lost a couple of key personnel. Whether those people were doing a great job or not, they actually haven't refilled those positions. So, Val's comes in having to do a lot of restructuring inside the team. So it's not just about what this team, and that, which is also going to be a distraction. So it just depends on how patient the owners can be with igniting this team again and again. There's just so many times you can do a rebuilding year, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I had in my notes. It's a new team boss in James Vowles. Certainly, James has been around the block, and knows the game. So with James coming in, actually feel really good about that.
Oh yeah, it's a great
and
move
I feel
by
like
them.
James is a super smart guy. They don't have a chief aerodynamicist. He left at the same time as Capito did.
They don't have a technical director either. I know you assume Vowles is
Yeah.
the technical director, but that's not really what his job is.
Yeah, right, right. Limited budget. This is a car that was built by two leaders that left the team, right? And to your point, Paul, it starts making me wonder how much patience will Doralton Capital have? And it's hard for me not to look now with James coming in, key personnel missing. This car was designed by, Capito-led team. It makes me wonder a little bit if Doralton then look at this as, okay, we've spent the last 2 years blowing a lot of resources, and this is where we are. So, so now we're going to go out and get James. And to your point, we're going to have a rebuilding year. But as an investment capital company, I don't know how many rebuild years and reboots they can do.
Yeah.
Although I feel like bringing James in is truly sort of the start of what this team could be.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a good move. It's a great move for him.
Yeah.
It gives him a great place where whatever he does, he's going to have a massive impact. And if he does bring that team up, they know exactly where to look, where it came from.
Yeah.
It's interesting nowadays because of the money structure where the teams can actually survive, even if they're the 10th place team. We saw teams when we were over 10 who didn't get money. They needed success to stay alive. Now, with a capital company, right? They're obviously there for money as well as the sport of it.
Yep.
And if they can keep the team in a tight budget, they can actually just keep some of that cash for themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're guaranteed money. So it depends on their ideology too. But Vowles is definitely a good step where you think, okay, a little more positive on the sporting side rather than just trying to make money.
Yeah, I don't know what Doralton's ROI is for owning this team.
Right.
But I'm starting to think very much the same for Gene Haas. But I'm starting to think that maybe their biggest asset isn't scrabbling for points and prize money. The biggest asset may be the team, the operation, the entrance, and official presence in Formula One. That's the asset, right? And it's a sellable asset right now, given that Andretti wants in and possibly 2 or 3 other teams want in, right? So I think from Doralton's standpoint, and I'm scratching my head on Gene Haas, but I feel like that's the true asset at this point. And it's a little concerning, but we'll see how it plays out. Let's move to Alpha Tower. You've got Nick DeVries. He's got 2 points in F1, 1 Grand Prix start last year setting in. You got Yuki Tsunoda. He's got 44 points on 44 Grand Prix starts. There's a Lewis Hamilton theme going there. So he averaged out a point per race. How do you see this year? Pierre Gasly leaving the team. I think Pierre, one thing you will see in Drive Survive is how much Pierre took Yuki under his wing and was trying to have his back. And really trying to take care of Yuki and help him along. And I didn't really see a lot of that last year, but or I didn't notice it. If it was all out in your face, I didn't notice it. But so without him, how do you see the two drivers' perspective?
Well, the two drivers' perspective, I think DeVries comes in with a stout resume of winning.
Yep. Laser focused.
He's there to make it happen. He's got bigger eyes
Oh
than
yeah.
just being in Formula One. He's, he feels deserved of having a top ride in F1, and this is just the first step.
Right.
So he's not going to be Yuki's mentor. I promise you that. He's got no reason to make Yuki look good at all. As I
Nope.
said, this is a stepping stone. So he really doesn't have a lot of buy-in with the team, technically. The team
Yeah.
should be very happy to have him, but they really need to manage it because he's a guy after his own skin, not after the team's skin. Certainly, not part of a Red Bull scheme that he's been a part of for a long time. He was literally brought in because he's the best driver they could get for the job of driving that team.
Yeah.
Yuki, I think, we've seen enough of Yuki to kind of know what to expect. He's had
Mm-hmm.
his chance to turn things around. I know it was said, oh, well, Yuki's going to have to be a team leader at this point, and but I just don't think he's cut of that cloth. So,
I don't either.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be so that, and especially now the team we talked about before when the the creator owner of Red Bull died, that things are going to be analyzed. And I think one of the things that's come up recently is that this team is being analyzed as
Yep.
to why it exists and what's its purpose,
Right.
and is it a positive purpose or a negative draw in the company. So the team itself, is in a bit of a, you know,
I agree.
questionable place. So we'll see how that affects where the team is also, because if they're just literally being sourced out to be bought, it's kind of like being a player on a team, right? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, or whatever. You're getting traded, so we're going to keep you on the bench, because we don't want to upset anything. So this team's going to be not what it was before. I don't feel it's well, there was no guarantees. And so, yeah, definitely the team is going to affect the drivers, but I think De Vries is going to be head and shoulders above Yuki, and he's going to have some magic moments out there if they can deliver a car that
Yeah.
can actually do that.
Yep. I agree with all the above. I think Nick DeVries is laser focused and very much to your point. And once you get through DTS, it's even clearer, but he is absolutely laser focused on this opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. He's going to make the absolute most out of this opportunity. Keep in
Right.
mind, he just left the Mercedes stable. So it's a big risk for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to maximize this opportunity to move up.
Yeah.
And Yuki, he will have no time for Yuki. I think
No.
he'll leave Yuki laying in a ditch somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But he is not there to play wet nurse to Yuki.
No.
And he's going to maximize it. Yuki, he's got to mature. He's got to bite his tongue and spend most of his time learning. And either he performs or he's out. I think this is his last shot. And
but I said learning, maturing. It's kind of like he's been in it long enough. That shouldn't be what the beginning of the season should be. It should be about
right.
Really showing your stuff. But yeah, as
There's
you say,
those
he
moments.
really hasn't.
Yeah, there's those moments when you go back, think of Lando, George, even Lewis, Max. You look at some of these drivers when they first come in. I mean, Max was 17. When you look at some of these drivers that come in, they're all young. They're young, guys, and they all had to have that light bulb moment. Remember a couple of years ago, you and I were like, everyone could see it. When Daniel was coming to McLaren, a light switch went off in Lando. He showed up that first year with Daniel, a completely different Lando. He elevated his game. He got mature about it. He wasn't the quirky little, sim racer on Twitch. He's still very much Lando. He hasn't lost that charm and that quirkiness, but he's a whole different character as far as taking it seriously. And like you said, Yuki's been in it long enough to do that too. I think very much, like you just said, like I talked about Williams, like I talked about Haas, I think Red Bull has looked at their investment. I think with Red Bull getting their new powertrain division, I think the money they're going to spend on that, I think it makes less and less sense to have AlphaTauri as a junior driver development program when they could work with other teams, plant some of their drivers at the smaller teams.
Right.
I think now AlphaTauri, because of the popularity of Formula One, just like Williams and Haas, the asset is the team. So now sell the team while it's at its maximum value, right? And so I could see that happening.
Yep.
Speaking of Haas, let's talk about Haas. You got Kevin Magnussen. He's got one podium, one pole position, 183 points, 141 starts, teaming up with new teammate Nico Hulkenberg, a veteran of Formula One. He's got one pole position, 521 points in F1, 181 starts. A pretty good pedigree himself. Both these drivers coming in. It's been a bumpy ride for Haas over the last couple of years. Perhaps MoneyGram can bring in some cash, and Gunther can stop the boat from rocking here. I don't know.
Hoping that MoneyGram is still around after 3 races.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it doesn't go all rich energy on us. Look, Mick made a good scapegoat last year. He did cause a lot of damage, and I understand that. That's a team that didn't have money to rebuild cars. Think Monaco. But I have to think that the driver lineup was the least of this team's issues last year, crashes withstanding. But bringing in the Hulk is a move to finish races, and it's a move to score points. And that's where this team is. Nico can do that. So can Kevin. The bigger question is, have they moved anywhere near, say, 5th through 7th place in the pecking order? And can they develop throughout the season? If they aren't moving forward and they're tight on cash, what's the upside for Gene?
Yeah.
No one bleeds cash and continues to do it with glee. So I still feel like the team is their biggest asset at this point. And why not talk to Andretti if he's hot and heavy to get in? I don't quite understand. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough year. But there's no doubt, Paul, bring in Nico to team up with Kevin. They're not about divining the next Ferrari talent, Ferrari Driver Academy. They're about scoring points.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot different mindset for everyone within the team.
Yeah.
When they had Nikita in there and Schumacher, it was about
Giovinazzi
babysitting. Babysitting and bringing these people up and giving them a shot and maturing them. Now they've actually got drivers that are ready to go. They're not going to be the question mark at all.
No.
We know these guys are good drivers. We know they can do it. They may not be Lewis Hamilton, but they're definitely Formula One caliber drivers that can get the job done on any given day. So the team's mindset will be actually a lot better, right? It'd be really interesting to see how they do work. Gunther's not going to be storming out. He's not going to be slamming doors. He's literally got to focus on the team, not about the drivers. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for him, we'll wait and see, right? Because there's nowhere for him to hide at this point. And so I think the team, the personnel in the team, I think will be very positive and excited about getting out there with these drivers. Whether the car's up for that level, I don't know, but it's certainly seemed in preseason testing that they weren't a joke. And they were a midfield team, and with these two drivers, they will be scoring more points than they ever have done. Really,
comes down to in-season development, doesn't it?
Yep. So yeah, I mean they need to jump on the first few races because we know their budgets are smaller, so development is going to be slower than some other teams who have got it wrong, probably like McLaren or even Mercedes a little bit. They need to take charge and score those points early, because eventually they're going to fall back. But right now it seems like they've got a pretty handy car. They should be able to score a few points, and that's exactly what those first 3 races have got to be focused on. Getting the car to the finish, making it reliable, and getting those guys in the points.
Yeah, and just to paraphrase what you said, Paul, it's just to support what you said, if a team doesn't have the resources for aggressive development program during the season all the way to the latter part of the season or through the summer break, then what they take out of the box at the first rate is pretty much what they've got. And you may find as one of those teams that where you are come mid-season, points-wise, that's pretty much all you got.
Yeah.
Right? And unless you get an attrition and luck into some points here or there, it's going to be a really hard row to hoe. And so at this point, I don't know how much money in cash Haas has to develop. I'm sure it's a little more limited. So to that point, you need to capitalize on your initial pace at the beginning of the season, harvest as many points as you possibly can, because it gets much more difficult come, after first 4, 5, 6, 7 races as everybody starts to develop and make those initial jumps in performance. It becomes harder for Haas to get a line of sight to some of those points down in 8th, 9th, 10th place. So,
yeah.
And to your point, it won't be because of the drivers.
Yeah, and then talking of Andretti, obviously Haas is the most US team, right? They do have certain parts of the team set in the United States, which no other team does. So it would make it a little easier transition for Andretti. I wouldn't put it past Andretti having a co-op with Haas, honestly. They do it all over the world with Walkinshaw Racing. They do it, many of their other, apart from their IndyCar team, actually associate with other teams and do joint ventures. I certainly wouldn't think that was out of the question, although it seems like Andretti's really got a bulldozer laser focus of really creating something new. So you just don't know what they've got going on there.
Michael's relationship with Gene is like, I don't know.
Yeah. Or if they have one.
Or if they have one, I don't know. I think I initially heard maybe it was rumors. It doesn't matter. So anyway, that's
used to go out in high school.
Yeah, I heard maybe they weren't the best of buds.
Is that right? Yeah.
Well, that's what I heard, but like I said, that's total rumors. They could be best of buds. I don't know. Okay, let's talk about Aston Martin. Fernando Alonso moving from Alpine last year over to Aston Martin, taking the place of Sebastian Vettel, who retired at the end of last year. Alonso's got 2 world championships, 32 wins, 98 podiums, 22 pole positions, 2,061 points, 355 race starts.
Oh my God.
That is a pedigree.
I remember back when Riccardo Patrese, one of my heroes, right, had like 150 starts, and that sounded astounding.
It was astounding.
Now 300, that's just absurd.
355 starts. I remember him in a Minardi.
Yeah. I also remember him in the Renault. Do you remember? I think people should go back and look some of the evolution of Formula One cars is interesting, but just his technique when he was driving the Renault at Japan, where he would just literally just, and there was a technical dynamic reason why he was driving that way, but it was just insane to watch how quick his inputs was, and it was so go back and look at some of Fernando's in-car cameras back from his Renault days.
There's a series about Fernando on Amazon that explains why he was doing that. And how he was doing that. It's not his normal style, but he found out that's how he had to do that to rotate the car and get that car to comply with what he wanted to do. And thankfully it had enough grip to hang on to that aggressive turn-in.
It was crazy.
If you watch him today, he doesn't do that.
No, the cars don't warrant that kind of abrupt style, and it is difficult to see technique nowadays. Everyone's got look very similar. You really have to really look close. But back then, that was like mind blown when I was watching him drive like that. I was like, I didn't even know how he was getting through that corner, let alone around a lap.
Right.
But, it's great stuff.
And then he'll team up with his boss's son, Lance Stroll. He's got 3 podiums, 1 pole position, 194 points, 122 starts. Challenge as a whole, look, you can't deny that Lawrence is putting his money where his mouth is, Paul. He is investing heavily in not only this F1 program, but Aston Martin in general. And look what he's doing in your series, Paul. Look what he's doing in motorsport in total, right? You got to appreciate that. Whether you find Lawrence your cup of tea or not, the guy is putting a lot of money behind this brand. They've poached Andrew Lacey and Dan Fallows from Red Bull. They hired Fernando Alonso right out from underneath Alpine. The second half of 2022 saw them really begin to harvest some consistent points, which at the time suggested that they did have a pretty aggressive development period for the second half. Now, at the Aston Martin launch this year, Lawrence made no bones about that and said, this car has been made for aggressive development, and that is what we're going to do. Now, he knows that the whole key to this is development, in-season development, and he has already stacked up the coin to invest heavily in that mid-season development of this car. All things given, with Fernando at the wheel, they could definitely make a move forward. While I thought Alonso initially may have chosen poorly by leaving Alpine because they finished well ahead of Aston Martin last year, he may not be. And listening to all the pundits,
maybe he finally made a good choice.
I know. He's got a history of making bad team choices, right? Yeah. And now the conversation may be a little different. I mean, a lot of the pundits from Sky and all those were saying that it's going to be a totally different Aston Martin, and they may beat Mercedes to third in the championship, be ahead of not only Alpine, but Mercedes. I'll get into that in the predictions of why I think that's a tall order. That is a big jump from where they finished last year. Keep in mind, these are all evolutions of a car.
Yeah.
That's a big jump. But how do you see this year for Fernando and Lance?
Well, so far, so good, I think. Yeah. As you say, I mean, literally, first time I saw the car, I was like, wow, that looks pretty good. The lines, everything kind of looked right as cars sit, as you can call a car sitting there. And definitely that seemed to carry on to the testing. It seems like it's a legit contender. They've made a lot of investment. They've got a new building. They're building their own wind tunnel. It's definitely how you need to behave if you want to be a manufacturer in Formula One.
For sure.
Right? If you want to be a Mercedes, if you want to be like Ferrari, you cannot keep doing it pretending to be a manufacturer when you're really just a customer team.
For sure.
Right? So that something had to change, and that's definitely part of the process last year with the evolution of the car, even if they're not chasing someone ahead of them, is to get everyone in that mindset and get the processes in place for development. And that's obviously paid off. And that paid off for designing a new car, and then it's going to pay off this year as the season goes along, because development is just as good, as the car you brought out there. So I think things look very good for Aston Martin, when a couple of years ago, they were whining for rule changes themselves, right? Because they'd got it so wrong. Because they followed that Mercedes thought pattern, but didn't get it quite as good as Mercedes did, even though Mercedes didn't have the best Mercedes they'd ever developed. So, it's very, very positive for those guys. And I think Alonso finally may have moved to the right place. Kind of like, probably we're not going to end up with the same accolades, but kind of like when Lewis moved to Mercedes from McLaren. You're like, what the hell are you doing, man? I think this is actually a positive move for Fernando, and it's going to release more life into this old man who can kick the young kids' asses still. So I'm really excited to see Fernando in this car. Really, really am.
Yeah, me too. And it'll be interesting. There's a couple of reasons I'm really questioning whether they're going to leap to third in the championship, but we'll go through our predictions to get there.
That's a long way to go. But if they can be nipping at the heels of Mercedes, that's like winning a world championship for these guys.
Well, and let me say, if they can do that and pass Mercedes and get third in the championship for where were they, 6th, 7th? If they did that, awesome. I'm elated for them. It's not that I'm poo-pooing them doing it. I'd just be over the moon for
big
them.
ask for sure. But as I said, even if they finish fourth in a competitive fourth, where they're closer than they ever have been, that would just kind of help everything get bigger and better quickly.
And if that car was thereabouts with Merc, there's no doubt that Fernando's going to deliver. But you also have to take the drivers into account. You got Fernando and Lance versus George and Lewis.
Yeah.
George and Lewis is a brutal combination of drivers.
It is.
Right? And Lance, this is where Lawrence may face the not
the
pretty truth. Yeah.
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah, you may have been better with Fernando and Vettel or somebody, but
for sure. I mean, but Lance has had moments.
He has had moments,
quite honestly, which is something. But I don't think he can, hold a candle to Fernando. So
right. And now we don't know about Lance, and they won't. The team won't say how injured he really is or not. So
right.
if he broke his wrist, it ain't gonna be Bahrain miss. He can be out for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so now they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And then it's all on Fernando's back to haul that team up to third place against Lewis and George. It's gonna be tough.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Gonna be tough.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Alfa Romeo Sauber. You got Valtteri Bottas, 10 Grand Prix wins, 67 podiums, 1,787 points, 200 Grand Prix starts. And then you have Zhou Guanyu, 6 points, best finish of a P8, 22 Grand Prix under his belt from his rookie season. Big changes over here. Fred Vasseur is out. Andreas Seidel is in as the CEO, poised for Audi's arrival. He's promoted Alessandro Aluni Bravo as the team representative or team boss. Now, Fred had the team in 6th last year, and they've inherited a car design under his leadership. But in-season development, again, is going to be key for this team. There's a part of me that feels this is simply a team waiting for Audi to show up. And then there's another part of me thinking, no, wait a minute. Would they pour a bunch of cash in this while they're waiting for Audi? But on the other side, Audi needs this chassis to develop, right? They need this program to come on song and start developing and be there. Maybe that cash will be there for in-season development. Can Andreas keep his team in 6th with a resurgent Aston, Alpine, and AlphaTauri? I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The good news is you've got a very stable driver in Valtteri. And I'm happy to say, based on his rookie year, I think Joe's done a great job too.
Indeed. Yeah.
So they've got 2 stable drivers to develop this program, let Andreas get his feet on the desk, get this program gelling for Audi. Maybe that in-season development's there. I don't know. How do you see their year?
Yeah, I mean, as well as it's interesting to know, it'd be interesting to know how big Alfa Romeo involvement is in this team. We know it's obviously got Ferrari engines, but how much of Alfa Romeo are actually intrinsic on the day-to-day running of this team? Or
probably not much. It's more
is
of
it just a badging?
Yeah.
In that case, that's better for Audi, because I know Audi pretty darn well in motorsports, and I know how they go about things. And
they don't go by half measures.
And they won't wait a second.
Yeah.
They won't sit, as you say, is it they're just going to let it? No, if they can literally get in there and start mucking in, they're going to do it, because it's to their benefit. They're going to learn as they go along. Even better for them to learn when their name's not on the side of the car, quite honestly.
And they've got a view to a Ferrari engine.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess that would help. But you can't really get inside the engines, unfortunately.
No.
But they'll learn.
They'll
learn
learn
some things for sure. But Seidel is obviously a fantastic motorsports manager, and he knows how it's done. He got the jump early, which is great for Audi. It's gonna be really interesting to see how it evolves, knowing that it was a car not designed by them. But I really think Audi will not hesitate to jump in and get involved in this evolvement of the car. It's only in their best interest, and Seidel was obviously going to be a catalyst to help that happen very easily. So yeah, I think we talked about it, I think at the end of last year, where this is a chance for both these drivers to audition for a job with Audi. I don't think both of them are going to make it, but Bottas for sure, just with his history, everything he's done over the years would be a good solid pick for Audi to bring. And they're not ones to bring in young bucks to try and lead their Formula One program. So I think Bottas has a chance to have a good position once Audi take over. So
but Audi does have some factory drivers they may just bring in.
They do, but I don't think they really have any that are Formula One
open wheel guys.
Yeah, I really don't. I just don't see that they have any of those kind of people, actually.
But it could be poised for Lando, could be poised for some of the top,
I mean,
to go after.
Kind of like we were talking about, why should Red Bull have a secondary team to bring their drivers? Audi can go there and pick the best drivers who are in Formula One right now and bring them over. Who doesn't want to drive for Audi?
Right.
Their history is success. So,
yeah,
as I said, I know how Audi works very well, and they're gonna do a great job, and we'll just see how this team evolves with that behind the scenes Audi involvement.
Right. This is the bigger head scratcher for me, is McLaren. You've got Lando Norris. He's got 1 pole position, 6 podiums, 428 points, 82 starts. And he's going to be teamed with a plucky young Oscar Piastri. Boy, it's his debut season. Boy, if you watch Drive to Survive, he does not come out of Drive to Survive looking very good.
Oh, really?
He doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, they kind of make Alpine and Otmar out the victim on this baby, and Oscar's kind of like, whatever. I'm not going to be a driver. It's gonna, If I was McLaren and Mark Webber, I'd try to get out in front of that narrative because he didn't come out of that looking too good. Gotcha. Anyway, Piastri's first season. Lando's feet are clearly on the desk here. McLaren made a few enemies poaching Oscar. But Oscar is absolutely highly touted as a future world champ by many teams. And this intra-team battle may be one to watch in the coming year with Lando. So stay put. He may have 2 tigers by the tail there. Up front, I think Mark and Zach, like I said, needed a little PR damage control because DTS didn't really position that, didn't shine a very positive light on Zach or Oscar, if I'm honest. They were kind of painted as cold, calculating opportunists to Alpine's humble.
Formula One? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. Who would have thought in Formula One?
The woman cuddly Formula One.
Yeah, it kind of, and then you got Otmar over there, kind of humble, so it's kind of interesting. In testing, though, McLaren seemed to really be on the back foot here, and this is a real problem. Having secured 4th in championship a couple years ago, going backwards is going to be very, very difficult. Many thinking that, Alpine's got the best of them, Aston Martin's got the best of them, Mercedes got the best of them. You can see this going backwards. They've doubled down on getting the best drivers they could, so kudos to Zach for that. But they've lost Andreas Seidel. There's a lot going on over there. Yeah. And going backwards, I'm just not sure how they're going to be able to. I think Lando's already getting frustrated. Word is out of testing. I don't know how long he is for that world. So things. Gosh, I thought everything was going in the right direction.
And it was going in the right direction, right? Yeah, it was. They just made a couple of errors in their development, and so I think it's more that than anything else than which drivers they're getting or anything like that. They've just kind of misstepping in their development chain, and you cannot do that when you're trying to make progress, when you're trying to bring yourself back up. I mean, think about where McLaren were a few years ago. It was horrendous, right? They were at the back of the pack, literally, with a world champion driving the car. So it's still better than it was, for sure. But the momentum has stopped. Yeah. Everyone was quick to say Ricciardo lost it, but I really think Lando was kind of making that car better than it should have been. Yeah. And Ricciardo was probably driving the car that was actually built, And so I think they were lucky to finish where they did in the end. So we'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not as dour as it sounds.
I mean, as I said, Formula One's cutthroat. Everyone's there for any kind of performance game. No one's the characters in Formula One, the people that everyone knows, the drivers or whatever. You poaching a driver from here or there, that can be perceived as being cutthroat, whatever. But we're seeing. But we're seeing a lot of other personnel jumping ship and moving to other teams too, right?
Including team bosses,
Exactly. And so there's that stuff's going on all the time. So I don't think she would be laser focused on Zach, on how he did it. And I remember when Michael Schumacher was, debuted in the Jordan, and then all of a sudden the next week he's in the Benetton. Think about the uproar that was. Yeah. Everyone was not looking kindly on Schumacher either for jumping ship and leaving the cute little Irish team. But ultimately, it's what he needed to do.
There was some even legal action done there.
Yeah, there was. And Jordan wasn't wasn't shy on having contracts, but
no,
but Benetton really wanted him, rightfully so, and he wanted to go, and that thrust Schumacher into a race-winning car very quickly.
And 2 titles. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Alpine. You got Pierre Gasly coming over from AlphaTauri. So a Frenchman at a French team teamed up. He's got 1 win, 3 podiums, 332 points, 108 starts. He's teamed up with another plucky Esteban Ocon, another Frenchman. He's got 1 win, 2 podiums, 364 points, 111 starts. So very evenly matched, both with a win. Pierre's got 1 more podium. Esteban's got a few more points and a few more starts, so 3 more starts. So anyway, very closely matched. Much has been made about the 2 of them not getting along and not being buddies. I don't think that's a prerequisite to be the team. So some of the challenges. Well, last year, Alpine quietly turned a tough start to the season into a recovery drive, really, in the hands of Fernando Alonso and Esteban to beat McLaren as best of the rest. And this was a big thing, where I mentioned Aston Martin harvested a majority of their points in the second half of the season. Alpine did too. They really turned that program around, and Alonso started coming on song, and that car did too, which is what you and I have been saying. This car needs to be on song by now, right? So this year, they need to consolidate that P4. I'm not suggesting they're going to leapfrog and beat everybody to P3 or beat Ferrari to P2 or whatever, but they've got to consolidate that P4 and chip away at P3 with Otmar. I'm cautious as if they have the car to do that, to beat Mercedes, and many believe that Aston Martin's going to leapfrog Alpine coming out of testing. I don't know that I'm convinced that'll happen, but despite that, the team seemed very confident. It was kind of a test that kind of their performance slightly hidden. They looked a bit stiff. Ant Davison pointed that out quite a bit. Their performance over the curbs, the rear of the car looked very, it's crashing into the curves, very stiff coming out of that. However, the team seemed very confident out of testing, making you wonder if they weren't sandbagging a little bit. I don't know. But it's all Otmar at this point. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can consolidate that 4th. How do you see their year going, Paul?
Yeah, this is a team I don't really know.
It's a question mark, isn't it?
I keep thinking one day they're going to literally find the magic bullet.
Me too.
And they're going to be right up there because they have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the bones of this team is championship winning team,
I know.
So they've got everything at hand to do it. More than even Aston Martin could have possibly do. They have to recreate something. Alpine kind of have it there on their plate,
and they've got the engine.
I know that the Renault, everything got depleted and everything, but the basic structure is there, and the winning, theory is still there and stout. So it's hard to, just this is my biggest question of the whole grid.
It is
what is going to happen with Alpine, because they could fall in their face and they could shine like a rosy star. So I can't make anything out of it. I don't think there's any place to sandbag in testing because it's only 3 test days. You don't have time to play those games. You can run with higher fuel loads and etc., but you just got to push forward as quickly as you can with development, even over those 3 days. So nothing to hide there. So
well, clearly they got 2 drivers that can deliver points.
They can deliver points. Are they race winners, championship contenders? I'm not sure about that. Gasly, I would say, I would lean more has the edge than Ocon.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think also these guys in their position in their careers, it's going to be difficult for the team to control that. Yeah. They're not going to be one for all and all for one. They really are going to fight each other alongside each other in the garages. They're not going to get along. So somehow Otmar has to get some positives out of that rivalry rather than just have to manage that rivalry the whole time, because that could be the biggest detractor from the team having the success that maybe the potential of the car has.
Well, Otmar's got a history of doing that with Esteban Ocon. Remember when he was with Sergio Perez at Force India?
Mm-hmm.
And Esteban was banging wheels all the time with Perez and vice versa. So Otmar had to calm that down pretty quick and had to deal with that. So this isn't going to be a dissimilar situation, possibly.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can see a bigger picture and get along and go out and score points because that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
That leads us down to Mercedes. You got Lewis Hamilton. Are you ready for some numbers? 7 world titles, 103 wins, 103 pole positions, 191 podiums, 4,405 points, 310 starts. My gosh, that reads, you'd almost have to have an abacus to keep track of all those numbers for Lewis. Needs no introduction. Lewis is a 7-time champion. Teamed up with George Russell. Now, where does he fit in? He's got 1 win under his belt. He's got a pole position, 9 podiums, 294 points, 82 race starts. This is a man on the move coming up. Finished the season ahead of Lewis Hamilton last year. And if you're a big fan of Will Buxton, he explained that that's because Lewis had all do all the donkey work and George got all the light work. I don't know that I believe that, but anyway.
Yeah.
Fair enough, Will. That's how you see it, buddy. You call them balls and strikes. Let's see. Big question here is post-testing is can they and have they made this car better? Is it correct? Is it a correct evolutionary step of last year's? They've gone with that zero side pod again. Now, no one really, including Mercedes, is porpoising like they were last year coming out of this year's testing. Merc did have some niggles, though. Stopped on track, had a few issues. They didn't come out of testing everybody hair on fire. But they were cautiously optimistic, I would say. The fact is, I've seen Merck sandbag in testing many times, so I wouldn't put anything beyond that. But I am curious. Look, you don't win 8 world championships by being a team that can't solve issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would never bet against Toto and this team. I think this team can get on top of it. Whether they have or not, I don't 100% know coming out of testing. Testing, I don't think, revealed that they've made the jump from third to take the fight to Ferrari. But if they do, it would not surprise me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's difficult to tell.
I don't know. Yeah, it is difficult to tell. I think they have made a jump forward. And I think, as you said, they're a team that can solve problems. And I think they're a lot closer than they were last year, where they will make progress. And I think they will be in the fight, and it will be a 3 manufacturer fight at certain tracks throughout the year. And it's going to be a lot closer than it was last year with them versus Ferrari and Red Bull on occasion, I think. Which is great. It's super to see that. And I think this last year was probably uninspiring for Lewis, I would think, struggling with that car.
Sure.
A guy that's used to having a car that he can win races, win championships with, on a turn. And that's difficult, especially the season coming off the season that he had where he lost the championship to Max. I think there was a lot of negatives going Lewis's way. And so I can understand why he wasn't necessarily at his best. And it certainly allowed George a little place in the sun to shine.
For sure.
So, and George definitely deserved it and drove some great races. But I don't think Lewis is going to be in the same mindset this year. I think some time has passed.
He wants that 8th title.
He does want it. And I think last year he saw there was no potential for that whatsoever. And I think he could probably see that there could be a potential this year. So I think he's going to be a bit more fired up. So I see Lewis having a bit of a turn. I think George is going to have a little more difficulty with Lewis. I see Lewis actually beating George this year in the championship. Where that ends up in the total pecking order, I don't know. But I think Lewis knows his time is short for the 8th title. And there's no reason to think that him and the team can't turn it around enough to actually give him a shot at it, at least.
Yeah, right. We will see. Let's go to Ferrari. You got Charles Leclerc, 5 wins, 18 pole positions, 24 podiums, 868 points, 102 starts. And his teammate Carlos Sainz, no change there. 1 win, 3 pole positions, 15 podiums, 782.5 points, 162 starts. Big changes here. Mattia Binotto out. Fred Vasseur in. Fred has a more casual, happy-go-lucky attitude on surface, but I do think he can kick some butts when need be. Can he turn Ferrari into a winner? Mattia did the lion's share of the lifting by delivering a very fast car last year, but reliability and strategy left them struggling to hold on to second place. This car would be an evolution of last year's Mattia-directed car. He's still figuring out, from Fred's perspective, he's still trying to figure out where the coffee maker is and the toilets are at Ferrari. He hasn't been there. It's early days for a team that has zero patience. This team has zero patience to wait any longer than they've already been waiting. And chief among them is Charles Leclerc. He's ready to win. As much as I'm concerned about Fred's ability to do what the team felt Mattia wasn't doing, I am reminded that the last time they hired a diminutive Frenchman, they won 5 titles in the form of Jean Todt. So it may come on song here. I don't know, but I think Fred's time to turn this around is very limited. The one thing I would say out of testing that had me slightly concerned is there was some conversation about those long runs, Ferrari having a lot of tire deg. Now, this testing track in Bahrain, it's an aggressive asphalt, and the track was a lot hotter than it normally would be during the race. Maybe that's just a testing phenomenon they experience that they aren't going to have at other tracks. But it is a carryover of what they struggled with last year.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but we saw last year certain teams can do well versus other tracks, depending on the surface, depending on the layout, et cetera, et cetera. Everything, unfortunately, because we're not seeing testing in different tracks, everything is focused on this one track. So is there, is it a disaster if they have tire deg here? I don't think so.
Yeah.
There's ways of getting around that. And the thing with Ferrari last year was not they didn't have a competitive car, but they didn't manage that competitiveness very well at all, both from the driver's side and from the team side. And that's why Binotto is gone, right? So that's hopefully something that Vasseur can bring to the team, a little calmness, certainly accountability, which with Matteo, he just didn't want to do it.
No.
He was a nice guy. He's a nice guy. And,
Maybe too nice.
He didn't want to hold anyone to the fire for making a mistake and making changes when they needed to be made.
Yeah.
He was a kinder, gentler guy, and that didn't really work for them.
Yeah.
And I think that probably frustrated Charles as well, because it seemed like they really have the bones of a good car.
I agree.
And so what do you need? You've got a good car. What do you need to back that up? You need a good team, and you need a good flow of progression. You need a good program to develop the car, and you need to control your drivers. And I think that's what Vasseur is there for. He's not there to design a front wing. He's there to bring some structure and positive structure to the whole setup. So we'll see. As you say, it's tough because he's new, and you come in new, you don't have all the history to make good decisions from. But hopefully he's a quick learner, and he gets to the nitty gritty pretty quick.
Yeah, totally agree. Let's see. Finally, Red Bull, Max Verstappen, 2 world championship titles, 35 wins, 20 poles, 77 podiums, 2,011 points, 163 starts. Max was on fire last year. Dominant performance by both Red Bull and Max. Both won the championship constructor and drivers. Teamed up with Sergio Perez. He's got 4 wins, 1 pole position, 26 podiums. 1,201 points, 235 starts. Sergio's been around a little while. He extended his contract last year. I think what's interesting is Red Bull certainly had a reduction of wind tunnel time due to the cost cap breach penalties that could play a role, but after testing. I mean, the car was pretty much already wind tunnel, or CFD designed and wind tunnel the components and thing. I think this may not have an impact on trying to wind tunnel development parts. I don't know. We'll see. They've got to be careful because if the wind tunnel time is reduced by 10%, which it is, they not only have to use that wind tunnel time in 2023 for development parts, but also to start developing and working on parts and pieces for 2024. So it'll be interesting to see the impact there. In my mind, this is the team to beat. And if Fred can solve Ferrari's issues, perhaps Red Bull could be challenged by Ferrari. Or if Merc is sandbagging and they've clawed back that, pace that they have, and that zero side pod starts to work, and they've got an 8 in a row pace, well, they too could possibly challenge Red Bull. But Max came out of testing and said, hey, yeah, car's better than last year's. That's a warning sign.
Ouch.
Right? Ouch.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the relationship between Max and Sergio. That got a lot of hair on it late last year, the last race. Hopefully last year's incident has been ironed out. Hopefully they can go forward. He needs Sergio behind him, finishing nose to tail. A key to the constructors is going to be in the hands of Sergio. And their goal is to finish nose to tail at every race if they can. If they dominate like last year, it will help you understand why everyone talks about Adrian Newey and what a genius he is, because this is an evolutionary car. And perhaps the departure of Dan Fallows will sting less if they can continue. But I think this is clearly the team to beat, even coming out of testing, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think really that they've got Newey, right? So he can draw a Formula One car on a napkin and be good. You know, if there's a team that can take a little less wind tunnel time and develop somehow within the team, it's Red Bull and Newey. So I think Newey would love that. you know, he would love less wind tunnel time and let the engineers and designers do some more stuff. But yeah, it's definitely the car to beat. Looked great in testing all the time. That I don't see a big issue with Sergio at this point. I don't want to say he's been beaten into his place, but I think he kind of knows his place.
Yeah, I think it's been reset.
Yeah, I think that, and I think, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about in that way. Max Verstappen is, one of the best drivers that ever was in Formula One, right? And playing second fiddle to him. I don't think Sergio's like a Barrichello and like a Massa. He doesn't give in as much, but I think the history of being in the Red Bull team and his years there now have pretty much set where he is. And he'll have his opportunities to win races for sure. But the competition is going to be closer, so he can't be dropping that many points to Max anyway, let alone trying to fight for a championship, which you may think he's going to do. But he's got to back up Max, and he certainly is more than capable, but we just got to really depends on Mercedes and Ferrari of how hard he's going to have to work to keep that. Yeah,
it really does. I agree with that. I think going to be a tough team to beat, no doubt about it. It's interesting. I guess this is the fun of F1. You remember when Ferrari had 5 titles in a row, and it was like, oh, Michael, he's not that great. He can only win when he has the best car. And, oh, it's easy to best the best car. At the time, I remember arguing, okay, no, wait a minute. When he went to Ferrari in '96, that was far from the best car, folks.
He helped develop that car.
He helped develop that, right? So. And then you got Vettel, and Vettel can't pass anyone. He can only win from pole, and he only wins because he's in the best car, and he had those 4 titles. But magically, when we got to Lewis with 8 titles, 7 for him and drivers, 8 for... Magically, that wasn't the best car. Magically, he reached deep down and pulled a greased pig and won, and somehow made it. It might as well have been a minority, right? And I was like, no, come on, guys. That car had such a baked-in advantage for years, from 2014 all the way through. Clearly the best car in the grid, no doubt. And now, magically, you can't say that, but now all of a sudden I'm saying, well, if he wins a title in 23, it's because Max can only win because he's in the best car. That old car, that's got to stop. I mean, yes, Max is in the best car, but he's a big part of making it the best car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just like Schumacher was. And you could argue just like Lewis had done with Mercedes, right?
Just like Lewis had done. Yeah. They deserve, it's all part, they're a key part of the evolution of the car. And they deserve the domination if they've done that good a job. Honestly, that's why I've never been one for pulling other people back.
No. Mercedes ran eight in a row. More power to them, man. They did a hell of a job.
And luckily they kept it interesting having Rosberg and Hamilton fighting it out.
Yeah, right.
But I think I mean, as maybe it got a little old, and it did, but then it made, when the Red Bull finally beat Mercedes, all the bigger a project.
Yeah.
You know, it was all the bigger an achievement, I would say.
You remember
when Ferrari started winning again against the mighty Mercedes. So.
I know. And remember when Schumacher, after all those dominating years in a Ferrari, and when Fernando and Renault beat him, it's like, whoa, you know, that was amazing, right?
Yeah.
So it happens. All right, let's give our predictions before we get out of the podcast. Let's hear your top 5 in the constructors, Paul. If you want to do all 10, you can. But
well, I think we, you know, we're pretty much
Red Bull
in a line at this point.
So we think Red Bull, Ferrari. There's a lot of folks that think Aston Martin is going to be third ahead of Alpine and Mercedes. I think, given the drivers that they have, I think that's a very tall order, given that the engine in the back of that is Mercedes. I think it's going to be Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. The question is Alpine or Aston Martin.
Yeah.
That's the question. So
that is a question. I'm gonna pick Aston Martin over that.
Yeah.
The Fernando effect.
Factor. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, Lance on his day can do it. That's going to be the difficult thing, is the backup to Fernando. Fernando will score more points than Gasly and Ocon, but can Lance bring enough points to lift Aston Martin over Alpine?
That'll be the question.
That's tough. Yeah.
I think that's where that comes down to, because with Esteban and Pierre, I think they'll deliver if it's there.
Yeah.
And the question is, can Lance have that consistency to deliver that points to allow the Constructors' Championship, to allow Aston to get ahead of Alpine?
Yeah. If I had to bet, I would say Fernando and Aston would beat Alpine, because I think the infighting between the two Frenchmen is actually going to be a deterrent for scoring points.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Top 3 in the Drivers' Championship.
Yep. I mean, you've written it down here exactly how I think it's going to go, is Max, Charles, and Sergio.
Just like last year. I kind of see it shaking out that way.
Yeah. The Lewis factor is difficult for me.
It's hard.
I think if Mercedes somehow do something that they're not where they are right now, but can quickly fix that, I do think Lewis was going to have a lot of energy to get something else done here.
Nobody's more motivated on that grid than he is to win that 8th title. If that car has made significant improvements from last year and it's working, then I have every reason to believe that Lewis can get into that 2nd, 3rd place for sure, possibly challenge for the win. But lot comes down to that Mercedes, and I'm just not quite sure that Mercedes is there with Ferrari. Although I would never put anything against Toto in that team. Look what they did last year. Damn near came back and beat Ferrari to 2nd in the championship.
Yeah.
And they do have George, which is consistently delivering those points, right? So it's tough. It's tough to guess, you know, it really is. I'm not saying that they won't. If it ends up, I'd hate it because everybody knows I'm a Ferrari fan, but if it ends up Mercedes is 2nd in the championship and Lewis is going, more power to him. So
but it's kind of funny that we didn't even talk about, did we even mention Carlos
Sainz?
Yeah.
No.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
It is.
Like, we've talked about every other driver on the grid, and we talked about Ferrari, we talked about a lot of things, but Carlos is kind of in the background there, which I don't know. I'm trying to figure that one out, because Carlos
it's not
is
really
a great
fair.
driver.
He's a great driver.
Yeah.
You know, he's got that win last year. He's You know, and you would say, well,
when you say Ferrari, you say Charles.
You say Charles because the team is behind Charles. But you know, look, I'm a Ferrari fan, and I'm not picking on Charles. I love Charles. I think he's awesome. Just as much as I love George and Lando. I think they're both awesome. I love those three drivers. But look, if you had to balance it, you know, Charles is not beyond the unforced errors. We've seen them, you know, where maybe not as much as from Carlos, right? And we saw Carlos lay down some great qualifying laps. Is he faster over a single lap than the long run? I don't know, but yeah, we shouldn't not be talking about Carlos. I mean, he's a factor.
Yeah, but he's kind of on the back burner. I mean, me personally, I think the driver lineup of Mercedes is probably the best out of those three teams.
I think it's really good,
and so that's going to help them. Carlos had some struggles last year with pace versus Charles, but as you say, Charles made mistakes. Carlos made mistakes.
Yeah.
But Charles was quicker, so that made him stand up.
The thing is, when you all come down to it, and everybody gives me a lot of grief for saying this, and especially when I imply that Lewis is like this, they get all mad, and they shouldn't get mad at me, because what makes Lewis a 7-time champion is that Lewis is ruthless. And all the Formula One champions are. Max is ruthless. Schumacher's ruthless. Senna, ruthless. You could argue Prost was a nice guy, but on track, he was ruthless. Yeah. Right? They all are. And Charles is ruthless, more so than Carlos, right?
Right.
And I think that's the difference. Vettel, ruthless, multi-21. He had no time for Mark Webber. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference. I mean, no, you know, Lewis is a gentleman driver. No, Lewis's racecraft is awesome, and he's a good driver, and he gives room. And that, but when it comes down to hammer and tongs, don't fool yourself. Lewis will take your head off. All right, he's ruthless. And so when you look at that, Fernando Alonso, same thing. So when you look at that, that's kind of why you had to gravitate towards those guys and those drivers, you know. But you're absolutely right. George Russell, ruthless, right?
Yeah.
Lando Norris, ruthless, right? You can see it in them. You can see that kernel of what makes them potential champions. I think Nick DeVries has that in him. I think Oscar Piastri probably has that in him. So that's what you're seeing in these guys.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. The reason I think Mercedes is ahead of Alpine and Aston Martin in the championship, I think it's the best driver lineup on the grid. And if there's even a sniff of a possible point, those two drivers will maximize it. Whereas I'm not 100%, I know Alonso will, not 100% convinced that Lance will, and I'm not 100% convinced that Pierre and Esteban will, not like Merck will, right?
Right.
So that's how I see it. But that's just my opinion. But by all means, folks, go to the website, theparkforme.com, find this podcast, share your thoughts, how you think it's going to finish. Top 5s, top 10s, whatever you want to do, top 20s, whatever you'd like to do.
Join the fantasy team and put your money where your mouth is. Yeah.
So you guys can go over, look at my Twitter feed or on our Facebook group page or our Facebook page, and go to one of those. I've put the code up there for you guys. Go to fantasygp.com. Great guys over there. I love those guys. A great little fantasy game. We have so much fun with it. So go over there, create an account, go to leagues, click join a league, look for The Park for May. You'll see us, and there's a join code that I've tweeted and put on Facebook and our Patreon. Go in there, put that join code in there, and you will be in our league, and we'll play along. I got absolutely beat like a piece of Samsonite luggage in an airport last year. The year before I was in the top 3, but this year I got killed. So anyway, I'm looking for redemption, but join us in the Fantasy Grand Prix, and that would be great fun.
Yeah.
And a huge, huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. We couldn't and wouldn't do this podcast without you. We hope you've enjoyed all the off-season banter and snark and back and forth and all the fun that we had over the off-season. But the season is upon us, Paul. And this time next week, we will be reviewing the first Grand Prix of the 2023 Formula One season, and looking forward to it. And Paul, I hope you're ready. Strap yourself in for another rip-roaring year.
I am ready. Yeah, it's
All
exciting. Right. Yeah, dude, it's going to be closer than ever before. It's going to be a big fight for sure.
Yeah, Yep. So we'll keep an eye. Paul and I will be here all year long to review the races, and we're going to keep you updated on Paul's races.
Yes.
In the meantime, we're
hunting championships too.
Yeah,
and race wins.
That's right. You're hunting race wins, championships. Sebring's next, right?
Yep. Sebring 12
When is that?
It's in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks.
The 14th or something like that.
Have you guys gone down and done some testing there?
We're testing this week.
Testing this week at Sebring.
Yeah.
All right, watch this space. Yeah. Well, keep us posted, man. Let us know how it goes. So.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right, folks. That does it for this episode. We'll be back next week to review the race. Have a great, great week. And until next week, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.